Even if everything you said was true, if the perception that you're creating with the buyer, with the customer, is one that might make you question your truthfulness, then you're injecting risk into the equation. You might get somebody to make a purchase that they would regret in hindsight, but it's a one-time purchase. They'll never come back, and you can't build a business on that. I thrive on variety. I think that's another reason I've always stayed in the agency business, because the number of different ways that people make money in this world is just unbelievable, and I get exposed to new ways every week.
This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day, carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fully Managed. Thank you, Chris, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Shannon. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So we're going to start today, get our creative juices flowing, get into it, get into the thick of it. So we're going to start with the game. This game is called Explain It Like I'm 5. So I'm going to mention some complex, I don't know if it's complex for all of us, but complex topics that you probably come across every day. And we're going to explain it to me as if I'm 5 and don't understand these concepts at all. Does that sound good?
Great exercise. So,
Alrighty. First one is brand identity.
start with the easy ones, huh? Okay. Brand identity is again, in a very simplistic explanation, how a company or a product would present itself to the world. So that could be the pictures that it uses to represent what the product is. It could be the colors that it chooses to use in their logo. It could be the style of the logo. It can include the words that they use to describe the product or the company when they're talking about themselves in advertising. Anything that you think of, if I were to list or to name a big brand, anything that your brain conjures up when you hear that name is the result of that company trying to define its brand identity to you.
I think a 5-year-old would understand that.
That makes sense?
That makes sense. I got it. In my pea brain, I got it. All right. Next one, sales funnel.
Oh boy. So I will tell you what the traditional explanation or definition of the sales funnel is, but I will qualify it by saying that it's probably not an accurate representation of what it's supposed to be describing. So the traditional sales funnel talks about the steps that a consumer goes through when they are buying anything. So the first step, and there are multiple different words that people use, but I was taught it's AICP, awareness, interest, consideration, purchase. So before somebody can buy anything, they actually have to know about it. They have to become aware of it, right? So a marketing campaign might be designed specifically just to create awareness of a brand or a product. Then once you're aware of it, once you know it actually exists, you have to learn something about it that would make you interested in it. Is that in fact something that I might want or need? After you develop some interest and maybe you learn a little bit about it, you put it in your consideration set. You start to actually think about, well, what would it be like if I bought that? What would I experience? How would I benefit by choosing that product versus another one? And then ultimately you purchase it. you buy it. Now there's even post-purchase components like loyalty, where you consistently buy the same brand, or advocacy, where you tell other people about how much you enjoyed that product or that brand. But that's the traditional funnel, and most marketing exercises for the last 75 years or so have been generally built around that funnel. We need to pull consumers through that funnel from initial awareness through purchasing. The internet changed that a lot just because it allows for a two-way dialogue, right? Buyers can talk back to brands and more buyers can talk to other buyers. And now marketers have to think about not only how do they communicate their message to buyers, but how do they communicate it to influencers. And there's also the ability for buyers to do a tremendous amount of research very, very easily. So they don't follow this very logical linear funnel. They go round and round. They go from awareness to interest to consideration, back to interest, back to consideration, back to maybe doing even more research and becoming aware of more competitors. And so what used to be considered a funnel is really now just a plate of spaghetti, and it becomes very, very difficult to think about it in a truly or linear fashion.
Yeah, it is very different nowadays. I definitely agree that it's not this typical approach anymore. A lot of people are trying new things, experimenting, and seeing what works for them specifically. And I think that that's we consider them all funnels for some reason, but they're not necessarily the style of a funnel, which is the original term had been coined from.
Yeah, correct.
Well, thank you for explaining these complex topics. I appreciate it. I think that any 5-year-olds watching would now understand these things. So thank you so much. And for those who are joining us and haven't watched this podcast before, this is the Fully Managed Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss marketing and business tips to help assist you on your business journey. I'm your host, Shannon, Penji's partnership coordinator, and I'm joined here today with a very special guest, Chris Finch from B&O. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Shannon. I'm really happy to be here. I love talking about this stuff, if you can't tell.
Awesome. Yeah, no, you're very passionate about it. Exactly. I think having the sales funnel and you exploring all of that and just the explanation, I think already shows me the excitement of even the simplest of topics, which is my favorite kind. So, could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? So, maybe explaining, maybe introducing yourself in a little different way than I would, and tell us anything relevant on your business journey that you think people would like to know.
Okay. I will try to keep it short and sweet, and then you can edit out all the boring stuff.
Yeah. No one's journey is boring.
Okay. I didn't start in advertising. I actually had a very brief career in the music business before I got into advertising. But in a way, it's what led me there, because there was some marketing involved in my role. And we also, my claim to fame is that the small indie label in New York City that I worked for was the first label that allowed users to download music of their favorite artists. Now, of course, this was back in the late 90s. So people were downloading through AOL dial-up. So it took about 4 minutes to download 5 seconds of music, which is and probably just hard to even imagine for some of your viewers.
The patience is not there anymore.
But I got a little bit of exposure to this new thing called the internet at the time. And so when I decided that it was time to leave the music business and get a real job, which should probably give you some idea of how much intelligence I have or don't have, because I considered advertising a real job. But my entree into that, I thought, was probably going to be digital marketing. So I took some time to just educate myself on the basics and the fundamentals. And then I just went knocking on doors. And it's a funny, quick little side story. I had received a job offer from, at the time, one of the large Madison Avenue-based advertising agencies, Gray Advertising, entry-level position as a project manager. I was walking up Madison Avenue with the acceptance letter in my back pocket when I got a call from the woman who was the HR manager for the digital advertising group at J. Walter Thompson, one of the other large global advertising agencies, who were headquartered on Lexington Avenue, a couple blocks away. And she said, "We really love your resume. Would you be willing to come in and talk?" And I said, "Sure." When? She said, "When are you available?" I said, "I'm 2 blocks away right now. How about if I come on over?" So I did. I met with the president of digital at JWT, which was their digital group, and their president. And they said, "We love what we hear. We'd love to make you an offer." So I did not go up to Gray and turn in my acceptance letter. I held on to it and ultimately took that job with JWT, and I was off to the races. And so for the next 10, 15 years or so, I was strictly working in digital marketing. The very basic fundamental stuff that we did back then, building functional websites and creating display ads for networks, and learned the business of advertising at the feet of some of the giants in the world, at the same time developing some understanding of the technology that was required to drive digital advertising. And I was just incredibly fortunate, right? I took that job at the very beginning of 2000. We had the internet bubble burst, but because I was in advertising, not working on the client side, our business was healthy enough that I was able to keep that job. During the financial downturn in 2008 and the housing crisis, when the economy was really slowing and many industries were struggling, digital advertising continued to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I managed to my job was never in jeopardy there. And through a series of friendships and relationships and contacts, I've had the great fortune of working for half a dozen or so different organizations, mostly agencies. I did a very brief stint at a big consulting firm in New York City, and then started my own shop, which I ran with my business partner for about 4 years. And then just about a year ago, I moved over. I went back into the agency business after being away for about 7 years. It's where my heart is. It's where I feel I belong. Working with clients, collaborating with clients, helping them figure out how to solve their marketing problems using everything that I've learned over the last 25 years. So I'm in a role now where my job is to define and deliver the strategic offering for our agency. So I started as a project manager. I did a lot of account management, client service work, which involves some strategy. And then I realized the thing that I loved most, the thing that really got me out of bed, to use a tired old saying, was understanding people, understanding how people work, understanding how people think, understanding why people do what they do, why people make the decisions that they make. And I love it because it's applicable outside of advertising, but it's necessary to be a good advertiser. You have to understand your audience. I am a advocate and a champion for customer centricity. Everything starts with understanding who your customer is, who they are, how they think, how they behave, what their needs and wants and desires are. And you can build the most powerful and effective strategies out of a deep understanding of your customer.
I 100% agree with that. I think that the psychology of marketing and advertising is probably the most interesting part of it. So I definitely resonate with your passion in relation to that, because it is centered around people and how people work and why they want to do something. And if you're not considering that, that's at a huge detriment to you.
Yep. Agreed. Some people will, I've absolutely had conversations with people who are a little skeptical of advertising because their perception is that its primary goal is to influence you or even trick you into buying something that you may not necessarily need. So it's trying to separate you from your money. And I actually see it much differently. I see it as finding a connection. Where can we find the people that most need, want, and can benefit from whatever product or service it is that you are selling, and make that connection such that both parties benefit from the from the relationship.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are not in or well versed in the marketing world that kind of think that the job is somewhat manipulative.
Mhm.
And I think I agree with you that I think that's kind of a misunderstanding of like you can't force someone to buy something. Like
Yep.
everyone has autonomy to choose what they purchase and what they want. And of course there's levels to that in the way of people do buy things that they don't need constantly. But that is like an advertisement can make that connection of the idea that they might not need it but they want it, and people buy things that they want and don't need all the time, and I don't
Yes.
necessarily mean that is always because of advertising or a
Yeah.
manipulation tactic. I think it's just the right place, right time sometimes.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And interesting. You can, I think, take some responsibility or have some influence that pushes people to purchase something that they may not necessarily be happy about, but they'll never buy it again. Right.
Yes,
So you'll never get repeat customers.
and
So
that's
if
what
you
people want.
if you want to push the boundaries and maybe dance around the edges of what's true, you might you might get somebody to make a purchase that they would regret in hindsight, but it's a one-time purchase. They'll never come back, and you can't build a business on that.
Yes, of course. You have to have a good product for longevity. You can or a service for longevity. Especially with how crucial reviews and referrals are to most businesses.
Great
You
point.
want people to be happy with what you're doing. So if you're skirting the lines of the truth or making something feel um that it is better than it actually is, then that's just going to not be good for you in the end.
The truth will come out.
Yeah.
It's everybody's if everybody is one click away from finding out whether or not your product or your service actually lives up to the value proposition that you put out there into the marketplace and use to sell it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, snake oil salesmen probably would have, been way better at their jobs before the digital age. But
Yeah.
there are people that can get things out there very easily now where, if you have a bad product and there's multiple people explaining that that product is bad or that service is bad, then you're already done for.
Yeah.
You want to be able to advertise the truth because you will continue to be successful if that's exactly what you're following through with.
Yeah. Yeah. The impetus is on brands that actually produce products that live up to expectations. If
Yeah.
they don't, they're bound to fail.
So having the decades of experience with strategy, which is
Uh,
so cool, not to date you. I think it's cool. I think that's really interesting. And I think that it's great to have that much experience in something because it goes for a better conversation. Is there any fundamental principles that have not changed, like based on like industry disruptions or like anything like that that you feel are centripetal to your position?
It's a really, really good question. Give me a second to think about it. I mean,
Of course.
I think that customer centricity has probably always been there. It's
Mhm.
just never been as appreciated or as important as it's become in the digital age, where where two things are true there. One, you have this two-way dialogue that I mentioned, where customers can talk back to you, and you have to. The advertising was never really about listening to customers.
Mhm.
In this day and age, I would hesitate to say it's almost as much about listening as it is. You have to pay attention to what your customers are telling you and be responsive. So that's a change in that we now have to learn how to listen very carefully, very attentively. But I think it's always been important to put your customer at the center of your marketing activities. Um, Technology has made so many things different in this space, but at the end of the day, the technology, all the various different technologies are just tools that you can use to create a connection between a brand and a buyer. I don't think that has changed. I don't think that will ever change.
Mhm.
We seem to keep going back to this point around, truth in advertising and authenticity. I think that's always been at the core of good advertising. That's really what I think with the planning or the strategy discipline in advertising is designed to do. It's designed to find that kernel of truth that exists somewhere within the brand and bring that to life in a way that the right kind of consumer will connect with it. And you can do that arguably better, certainly in more ways, given all the different technology platforms that are available to connect with consumers. But at the end of the day, it's the creative, it's the combination of imagery and words and music that form some type of content that your audience ingests through their senses. And if that doesn't connect with them in a way that fulfills a need that they have, you're bound to fail. I don't think that's changed at all. I don't think that's changed in the 100 years, since the first newspaper decided that, in addition to charging a penny per copy, they could also sell space on one of their pages to a product and make additional revenue that way. Whatever that first ad was, if that ad didn't offer up something to the readers that they realized they wanted and needed, made that connection with them, then their money was wasted. I don't think that's changed, and I don't think that will ever change.
Yeah, I definitely think that, multiple things that you said, truth, extremely important. I think that transparency will never go away. People will always value that. I think that if people feel tricked, that is the worst thing that could possibly happen. Even if they're not being tricked, I think there's a way of creating an advertisement that can feel too good to be true, and then someone may feel like it's their trick or being tricked or trying to be tricked, even if that's not necessarily what is happening. Maybe the product is exactly what it is being advertised, and it is actually too good to be, or it's as good to be true. But I think there's a way of conveying that to people so that they genuinely believe you, which may not even just be about transparency, but also about style in the way in which and that's where creativity comes into what you mentioned, is the idea of putting all of those facts in a way that makes someone not only believe you for it to be the truth, but also want to purchase something.
Yeah. It's a really interesting point. You're talking about perception being reality. And I suppose there's a scenario where you have a product where the actual functional benefits of the product are so good that if that's all you emphasized in your advertising, you would run the risk that your consumers might not believe you. It's sort of that too good to be true scenario. So you've got to pay attention to what sort of perception you're creating. And yeah, I imagine there's probably scenarios where you might even need to downplay some of the benefits because of the effort to protect the reputation of the brand, not create a perception that you're trying to communicate something that isn't true, even though it is. If you again, comes back to being customer centric, right? You even if everything you said was true, if the perception that you're creating with the buyer, with the customer, is one that might make you question your truthfulness, then you're injecting risk into the equation. So you just,
Exactly.
the customer has to be at the center of everything that you're doing.
People really do have to consider all facets of a customer as well, because it's such a great point to bring up, because I feel like I haven't discussed this exact idea before, but the idea of specifically healthcare, health and wellness industries, I think have the biggest difficulty with this, of being transparent, but balancing it with the idea of all the benefits may be overwhelming to a consumer, and the idea of that the trust is almost taken away because of how good it is. People don't believe in things that work wonders.
Right.
They
Right.
they
Good point. Good point.
And that's
Yeah.
such an interesting aspect of marketing, is the idea of like, you really do have to be strategic with everything you do, whether the product is a wonder or an incredible discovery that no one has ever put out before. It's still, you have to consider the consumer first of all more than anything. You can have a great product, but you could advertise it poorly and no one will buy into it.
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody were to actually discover the fountain of youth, they would probably have to really undersell it, because nobody would actually believe that
Yeah.
it delivered everything that they promised it would.
Yeah, they could advertise it that it makes your skin look a little better, and
Right.
then but I guess that would be trickery in the idea of they may be immortal now instead of just their skin looking a little better. So I want to learn a little more about B&O and it being such a great place to work. I see a lot of, because you went back into the agency world, which
I
is like
did.
a very difficult, I feel like you said that you belong there, and that's wonderful. I think that the agency world is very different than, let's say, the corporate world, and I
Mhm.
love the aspects of that, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that would agree with that. But what about, after creating like your own business, what about this specific agency made you want to, continue to do this work with them specifically?
Okay, great. It's not something that I've had the opportunity to speak about, but I'm glad to have that opportunity, because it is meaningful to me. Um, so yeah, as I mentioned, I was out of the agency space for, well, let me do the math here, 2016 so a little over 8 years, um,
Long time.
between working for a consulting firm in New York and then running my own business for a little over 4 years. I think what I missed most about, well, there are two things. At the consulting firm, I missed the engagement with the clients, the day-to-day collaboration and exchange with the clients themselves. I do consider myself a problem solver. I like to be, challenged with problems and thinking it through. And the satisfaction that I get from ultimately solving it, especially solving it on behalf of for somebody else, just gives me a tremendous sense of sort of self satisfaction. So I like that exercise. Didn't have that opportunity at consultancy. It was a massive corporation, right? 200,000 employees around the globe, a very, very small cog in this machine with a very defined role and responsibility there.
Yeah, it's
And
almost similar to a corporate environment.
yeah, it
A lot of
was. It
people like
was.
to
It
get
was
away
much more
with.
corporate than the agency space, and very, very little direct engagement with the clients themselves. And then running my own business, it was sort of the flip side of that. It was daily interaction, engagement with clients. It was just me and my business partner, and he was the creative component. Was a creative director at a handful of agencies over the course of his career. So I ran account management and client management and strategy, and he did all the creative work. Um, but it was just the two of us. So the variety of input that I got was fairly limited. He was a wonderful, wonderful partner, but it was just one perspective.
Mhm.
And I thrive on variety. I think that's another reason I've always stayed in the agency business, is because, I mean, the number of different ways that people make money in this world is just unbelievable. And I get exposed to new ways every week. Um, all the different business models that are out there, all the different ways of taking a product to market, never gets old. And I realized that what I was missing was the multiple points of view, a greater variety of opinions, um, perspectives, different backgrounds, just different ways of thinking about things. I wanted exposure to a greater variety. And that's ultimately, I think, what drew me back to the agency business. There was a contact there. The woman who's the CEO there is somebody that I worked with previously. So when it became obvious that it was time to close our business, we had a couple conversations that ultimately led to an opportunity. The agency itself is one of the most, I would say, emotionally gratifying places that I've ever had to work at. The people there are so committed to doing good work. I don't know how else to describe it. There is just a level of desire to hold each other and to hold yourself accountable such that all of your colleagues benefit from that. It's a culture that I think so many different agencies I've worked for have strived for, but have never quite achieved. And I want to pause at that point, talk about culture for a minute, because I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding around culture and specifically how it's created in a business. And even the way that I just phrased that was wrong. I don't think that I think it's very difficult to intentionally create a culture. I think culture is the result of the people who you hire.
Yep.
Right? It's a combination of the personalities that work at that company. So you can intentionally craft a culture based on a hiring strategy, but there's still a lot of guesswork, right? You don't exactly know somebody. When you hire them, they have to be on board and be part of the company for a while before you truly know who they are. So you can try to craft a culture through a hiring strategy, but there's still a lot of luck involved. I think there's a little bit of a self-censorship that happens if you have the opportunity to meet with, and in my case, actually work with, because I contracted with B&O for a number of months before I took a full-time position there. I really had the opportunity to get to know a half a dozen people there before I took a role, and they got to know me as well. So I think there was a bit of a vetting process, even if it wasn't intentional. Did I have the right skill set? That was probably something that was being evaluated, but was I did I bring the right kind of energy? Did I bring the appropriate engagement strategy to working with my colleagues that they felt would work well in the organization? I'm sure that was something that was looked at very closely. So it felt like it was a good fit, right? That's a phrase that everybody uses. It felt like it was a good fit for many, many different reasons. And what am I, 10 months into it now? I would say I probably underestimated how good a fit it was.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fairly confident that I'm adding a lot of value. I'm fairly comfortable that I'm actually contributing my worth to the organization. And I probably underestimated how much I was going to get out of it working with all the other individuals there. I couldn't speak any higher of the organization, of the people who are in leadership roles, really steering the ship there, and then everybody else who's working really, really hard to keep it moving forward. It's been a great experience so far. We are a scrappy little bunch, and we're not tiny. We're in that sort of 50 to 60 person range, and we've got different offices on the East Coast. We've got some really big name clients. But what makes us stand out is, I think, just our agility, our ability to think fast, move fast, and be really, really focused on delivering tangible results, things that the client is going to be able to, quantify the impact of the work that we did. That's so gratifying. When I was in high school, I worked for I worked in restaurants. I worked for carpenters. And at the end of the day, you could sort of stand back and look at your work. You could see, hey, whatever, we served 300 dinners tonight, or, we finished framing out that part of the house. You could see what was there. And it was a great feeling. And I'm getting that feeling almost every day at BNO. I can sort of at the end of the day look and actually see the tangible output of work that was accomplished by the team. And I mean, there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than feeling like I did good work today. It was recognized by people that mattered, and I'm going to be able to get up tomorrow morning and do the same thing.
That's incredible to hear all of those different things that you mentioned. Specifically, the idea about company culture, I think, is really important to mention, because I do agree with you that that's not something that you can necessarily like curate. It's
Yeah.
something that kind of comes naturally. And I think that there is really something to say about when one works so perfectly. Like what you're saying is the idea that I think the most optimal culture, it may not be the best for one person that like comes and realizes that maybe that's not for them,
Yeah.
or that type of
Yeah.
environment. And or someone stays in a certain culture for too long that doesn't work for them either, and you don't see that accountability in the same way that you're explaining, in the idea of like you admire everyone around you and the way that they do things, and there's that level of accountability that comes into that of um I want to be just as proud as my work as this person is, or I want to contribute to this great thing that we're all creating together. And I think when you have a company culture that works, you feel that no matter what way it works, you feel that way because you fit. I think almost it just makes sense, and you resonate with the mentality of your peers and your higher ups and whatever it may be. And I think that's such a wonderful thing that doesn't happen all the time, or doesn't happen perfectly all the time.
Yeah. I love the way you put it. I've never put it that way before. I'm not sure I've heard anybody else put it that way before, but I 100% agree. I do, in fact, admire everybody else that works there for the unique contribution that they make. And that's I think I just learned something pretty important. One of the capabilities that BNO has that we are really known for well in the marketplace is work that we do in the employer branding area. So employer branding is, when crafting campaigns which are designed to um, retain existing employees or attract new employees, right? It's how do you brand yourself to an audience of existing and potential employees? And the idea and a lot of the work that we do is, well, what is it about this company's culture that makes us different or unique, or would make us attractive to what type of employees, right?
Mhm.
Just like when you're trying to find, a buyer who wants to and connect them with the right product or service. In employer branding, you're trying to find, a potential candidate and connect them with the right employer. And we talk a lot about and spend a lot of time trying to understand our clients' cultures so that we then can go out and find the right employees who would be a good cultural fit. And one of the attributes that I think I am now going to considering adding to our list of key attributes is something around this idea of mutual admiration. There is something there that I think is probably really powerful, and I'm not sure that we've used that term in the past. So I think I just learned. I think I just developed or gained or picked up an insight from this conversation that I might use in our work, which is a wonderful surprise.
No, I appreciate that. I this podcast is my favorite thing because I get to learn from it every time I have
Yeah.
something. So the fact that you were able to learn from it makes me even happier. It's that's my favorite thing about I do truly understand and this kind of admiration for your peers, because even though this podcast is I consider peers because we do similar
Yeah.
jobs or we're in the same space. But even though we don't work for the same agency or the same company or the same business, I get so much value from everyone that comes on here because everyone has their unique way of doing things. And I get to learn so much more and at this crazy fast pace than just experiencing all of those different scenarios myself because all of these people, including you, have experienced things differently and have reacted and adjusted differently to those scenarios. And I love a culture that has mutual admiration. I think is wonderful, and I'm happy that you're able to experience that because it is such it is such a pleasure. You get something out of work every day, and it's something that you get to consistently learn from people that you value and you admire, and that is such a what's the word? Blessing maybe.
Sure.
That I'm looking for.
Yeah, I feel incredibly fortunate. So yeah, it's a good term.
Well, we are a little over time, so I'm actually going to cut us off now, unfortunately. But I think
Okay.
this ended on a really wholesome note, so I'm very happy, and I really learned a lot from you on this podcast. So I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, well, like I said, I feel like I learned something too, which was not necessarily unexpected, but bit of a pleasant surprise. So enjoyed the time, enjoyed talking to you a lot. Actually, it's always fun. It's always fun to have the opportunity to try to explain to somebody else what it is that I do, because it's a bit of a pressure test. Do I actually understand what I do? I hope I was able to articulate it in a way that
You did it very
you and
well.
your viewers can understand.
Yeah, and I think it's also sometimes fun to explain what to you do because it almost provides new value to you every time
Sure.
because you realize that you find more things about it that you don't recognize are things that you enjoy about it
Yep.
sometimes. And I'm happy that one, you were able to find something new to be able to describe how well your work environment is. But I'm also happy that you were able to get value out of this podcast as well. So I really appreciate everything that you contributed to this, and thank you for joining me again.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone watching or listening. Don't forget to check out other episodes to get to learn like I get to do podcasts. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
Thanks, Shane.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.